Eric, sorry. I know it's your Eric. Ooh. Is one of your two, oh, is that your middle name? That works. Okay, that's good. I'll do what Eric said. And Andrew has two first names, so there's very confusing. No, I didn't say Rachel. I knew as I said it, but I was wrong. So, okay. So that was all a sidebar, which had absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing, except as an illustration that sometimes these econometric exercises of replicating somebody else's results can turn up fascinating things. No. So how does it get published in the first place? When you get a paper, so somebody writes a paper and they send it off and it gets refereed. You never get the data set that goes with it because you don't send off the data set when you send off your paper. So the presumption is always that you have double checked your econometrics and you're very confident that you have done all of your coding correctly and you have done all of your econometrics correctly, and that there's no need to do that baseline double checking. So it was also, I mentioned that Fogel and Ingerman, Time on the Cross, when we talked about slavery, the very same thing that happened with Fogel and Ingerman's Time on the Cross in 1975. So Fogel and Ingerman had this book, Time on the Cross, which was a huge splash that totally revamped how people were supposed to think about slavery, and it turned out they had a whole lot of they'd had some basic math errors, they'd had some interpretation errors, they'd had some, what are you doing here, errors as well. Yep. Rogoff and Reinhardt initially said, oh, no, everything's fine, and this goes very fast right now because everybody has blogs now, and so this hits the blogosphere on Monday, and so this has all happened in the last 3 days. When did the Ash paper come out? The original paper is... No, the UMass paper was on the 16th, on Monday. The original Rogoff and Reinhardt, I think, is in 2005. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, they're at Harvard. So so when the Ash thing comes out on Monday and it hits the blogosphere, the initial response from Rogoff and Reinhardt was no, everything's fine. But the more economics blogs that pick this up, and then Krugman picks it up, and so then it's in the New York Times and it's in the Wall Street Journal, and then all of a sudden they go, in polite Harvard language, oh shit. They don't say that at Harvard, right? They say, oh my dear, this must be a mistake. But so they had to backtrack, and so they're now in a position of saying, well, our substantive results still stand, and everybody's saying, well, no, your substantive result was that once debt to GDP ratio hits this level, then economies will decline, and if a minus sign becomes a plus sign, that's no longer a decline. So it's a big deal. So this is what goes for fun in economic circles. If you think you want to grow up and be an economics professor, this is what's going to float your boat. True? Oh yeah, it's true. It is all the buzz. All right, back to Rothorn and Ramaswamy. One of these R&Rs. We looked at the results the other day and we got this far on Tuesday, which is to say that their results in terms of income showed that the demand for manufacturers increased at a decreasing rate. The key question was where's the turning point? And the turning point was at about 80, let's say around 8,500 in terms of income, which meant that most of the countries, or many of the developed countries, were in the range of this parabola where demand for manufacturing was actually going down. Second question was about productivity growth. So for productivity growth, we're looking particularly at the effect of relative prices. As productivity grows, with manufacturing productivity growing faster than service productivity, that's going to decrease the relative price of manufacturers. You would expect a decrease in the relative price of manufacturers would increase the demand for manufacturers, so that's going to offset the income effect. So if the income effect is shifting demand away from manufacturers, the price effect should be shifting demand towards manufacturers. You have to turn yourself on, you have to go on your head to see it, but that's the result they get. So they have a negative sign here, which means an increase in price is going to lead to a decrease in manufacturing. We don't have an increase in price. What we're observing is decreases in prices because of the differences between manufacturing and service productivity. So just flip that relationship over. That negative sign tells you as well that a decrease in price leads to an increase in manufacturing. So these have an indirect or negative relationship with each other. When one goes up, the other goes down. That says that the productivity gains would not cause the industrialization. The productivity gains should cause, the productivity gains just by themselves should cause price changes, which cause the demand for manufacturing to go back up. But the productivity gains are not included in the employment picture because the price effects are affecting the quantity that's demanded. They're not affecting the labor input into the amount that's produced. Nick? Yep. So this does not take manufacturing and split it up at all. So they're just looking at manufacturing. So they've got manufacturing of durable goods and manufacturing of non-durable goods. They've got manufacturing of low-tech type goods and high-tech type goods. It's all mushed together in one thing. The relative, it would be interesting to look at the difference in the productivity gains. I'm going to show you some numbers at the very end. I won't get to it today, but I'll get to it Tuesday. There are extraordinarily different patterns of productivity gains between different of these subsectors. Okay, and then the third question was trade and whether or not trade contributed to the changes in manufacturing. And they look at that by looking at both the trade balance, which is exports minus imports, as well as the imports from the less developed countries. So this is north-south trade is this other line. The one thing I did do, just as an FYI, this is FYI for these guys over here. One thing I did do when I replicated was I clustered the standard errors by country so that the statistical significance is much less than what they get. Yeah. So it's still there though. Yeah. Okay, so what do we get there? We get that the trade patterns do have a role to play, and so the greater the net exports from a country, the higher is their manufacturing share in output, and the higher is their manufacturing share in employment. So the more a country is trading, the more manufactured goods they're going to be producing. The trade from less developed countries, so that north-south trade doesn't really seem to matter. And once I redid these things and corrected for issues they had with their standard errors, it really doesn't matter. So the story about north-south trade, that does not stand up to the scrutiny of the empirical work. So what does stand up to the scrutiny of the empirical work is the role of income in shifting demand, and the role of north-south trade in preserving the production of, the role of trade generally in preserving the production of manufacturing. Okay, questions? Yeah.
So based off of the graph that you showed earlier, does that mean that the curve is flatter?
So the graphs I showed are the actual graphs.
Yeah, so does that kind of resemble the share of manufacturing versus per capita?
So the graphs were just looking at the share of manufacturing over time and tracing it over time, and I don't know how that would match with income. I don't think I'm answering the question. I don't think I'm understanding your question.
Whether you could translate that to that time scale to per capita income.
So could I redraw the graphs and instead of having time on the horizontal axis, have income on the horizontal axis?
Yeah, and that would mean that it's by that recursive divided.
Yeah, you certainly could. I don't think his question's not about clustering the standard errors, is it?
It's about
It could be.
So is there like a relationship to non-relationship income data?
Yeah.
So like based on like the single use both ways, you still have this like upward down relationship between employment share and income.
How
steep is it? So the steepness of the relationship between manufacturing and income is determined by these coefficients. It's not changed by the corrections I made for correcting for how they measure their standard errors. And I did not graph that, but it certainly would be possible to go back and graph it and to see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So what you just said that based on the export and import tools there, that means like the more you're trading, the higher the manufacturing.
Right.
Is that the case, or is that the greater the net export is more?
Right. So it is the more. Yeah. So I misspoke. So it's not just the more. It's not the more your exports are. It's the more your net exports are. Right. So it's your trade balance. So the more your trade balance moves towards trade surplus because you're exporting more than you're importing, then the more you're manufacturing, which is going to come either from a change in exports or change in imports.
Yeah, but if they're both increasing, that's
If both exports and imports are increasing, then the value of exports minus imports isn't going to change over time. Yeah.
So like the advantage for trade on there's like a less developed countries on actually not relative to like their other group. So like which is like they'll be importing a lot from highly developed, so they will be sending up those things. And that's really what that's sort of like. And that's more sort of an activity.
But it also, we haven't talked about this in our meetings, but also could have to do why Japan has such a funny shape, right? Yeah. So okay. All right. Moving on. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So a little bit more about services. This table, nobody's really asked this question, but I'll go ahead and show you this table anyway because it was a lot of work to make it. This table uses what are called input-output tables. And input-output tables say, as we're producing this overhead projector, so this overhead projector is, let's say, a $500 overhead projector. From what industries do the inputs into this projector come from? And how much of that $500 is the value that was added by the people who finally put this together at the end and sold it to you? So it could be, for instance, this $500 projector could be $25 worth of plastic. So that would be a goods input in the production of good. It could be that the company that made it, 3M, let's say 3M, the company that made it has lawyers on retainer, and so part of the inputs into producing this is a little bit that goes towards the lawyers that 3M has on their staff, or the 3M pays. There's some glass and there's some other things. There was the transportation, so the distribution of it included the trucking of it to get it here to UC Berkeley. And then there's all of the additions that made this worth $500 that came from the folks who figured out how to put together the plastic and the glass and the other things that are in the electricity and the other things that are inside, which I know is not actually electricity, but that's fine. So how they break that out, when you look at the output of goods, so this is a good, and now we're on the first 4 columns. The output of goods, and when goods are produced, what share of the value of the goods that are being produced comes from inputs from first the agriculture and mining sector. So corn, which goes into everything including tires and diapers, or gold or copper. Goods, there's the second column, so what share of the inputs are from the goods sector, so plastic would be a good, glass would be a good, and so on. What share of the inputs are coming from the service sector, so if they hire a legal firm, if they hire an accounting firm, if they hire janitorial services, those are all services that go into producing output. And then what's left over, this $500, so the $500 they took in when they sold this thing, that didn't go to the various companies that had supplied inputs, that's the value that's added. You don't know whether that value added is retained by the workers or retained by the owners or shared on an equitable basis between the owners and the workers, but it's the value that was added, it's the income that goes to some combination of the owners and the workers. The first 4 columns show you the inputs going into producing goods. The second 4 columns show you the inputs going into the production of services. So a couple of things to take away from this chart. One is that when people first started noticing the rise of services, one of the things they talked about was this pattern of contracting out. So contracting out means, for instance, good old 3M here. If 3M used to have an accounting department, so people who were accountants who worked for 3M, their paychecks came from the 3M corporation, those people, when they worked for 3M, their employment, they were employed by a goods producing company. And if they worked for 3M when 3M produced this lovely thing, their accounting services that were provided to 3M would have been included in the value added column because they were part of the team that produced this lovely overhead projector. If 3M closes its accounting department, lays off all of its accountants, and then goes out and hires accountants from Bob, the account temps company, they still have people who are doing accounting for them, but those people who are doing accounting for them are no longer on their payroll. They're no longer on the 3M payroll. They're now on the payroll of Bob, the account temps people, and that's a service provider. That's a company that produces a service, which is accounting services. That pattern of closing departments in-house, particularly within manufacturing companies, and then hiring in the exact same services, but from some service provider, that's called contracting out. So you contract out your accounting job, or you contract out your legal services department, or you contract out your marketing people, or you contract out your development people. So that's what contracting out is. Where we would see it is we would see it as a change out of value added and into services. So we'd see a greater share of service input and a smaller share of value added in the contribution to total output. We actually see it. So you can see it. It comes in right here. From in the 87, 92, and 97 figures. These input-output tables are a pain in the derriere to put together, and so the Bureau of Economic Analysis that puts them together only issued them every 5 years. So it's not like I picked and chose which years to do, but until 1998 or so, 96 I think it was, they only did them every 5 years, and now they issue them annually because now it's all electronic. But back in the day when it was all done with pen and paper, pencil and paper, it was an enormously huge job, and they would only publish them every 5 years. So you can see this pattern of contracting out really characterized what was going on in the goods producing, the manufacturing industry here in 87 to 97. So it was really part of the 80s and the 90s, was this movement of employment out of goods producing companies and into service producing companies. The other thing that you can see is that in the production of services, on the right, in the production of services, very few goods are involved. So when you get your teeth cleaned, there's a little bit of toothpaste and all of that plastic and paper and everything that they now have to put over everything so you don't get germs from the equipment. And there's a few goods here and there that are involved in getting your teeth cleaned. But most of the value of that $100 teeth cleaning that you get, most of that is value added. That is, most of it is direct income to the dentist, the hygienist, and anybody else who works at the dental office. So in the production of services, there are very few goods inputs, and most of the value of the production of services comes actually from the very last moment of the actual production of the service. Okay, what else? Relative pay. I thought I showed you this one on, did I show you this one on Tuesday? You don't remember. Relative pay, this is looking at whether or not this rise of services is a rise of good jobs or bad jobs is determined by the amount of pay. On here I've got manufacturing jobs and I've got construction jobs. The one unlabeled line is the purple line I was running out of room, and that's government jobs. These things are all indexed so that they're all in each year it's showing you how much you would earn in choose an industry, retail trade, relative to the average earnings for the whole country. Okay? So if the line is declining, then people in that industry are doing worse over time relative to the rest of the country. If the line is rising, then people are doing better over time relative to the rest of the country. If the line is stable, if it's the same, then people are neither gaining nor losing relative to the rest of the country over time, people in that industry. And what do we get? We get that manufacturing is relatively stable. So manufacturing is the brownish line there. It's gone up a little bit, and that's why they talk about manufacturing as being good jobs. So manufacturing jobs are good jobs because the average wage in manufacturing tends to be above 100, that's the key line, which means people in manufacturing tend to make more than the average worker in the United States. But how much more they make hasn't really changed over time. So that line is pretty much straight. Sharita. Sharada. It is, yes. Okay. Construction jobs. Construction jobs, on the other hand, that line has gone down. So it used to be the case that construction jobs were much better than average. So in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, if you worked in construction, you earned wages that were much above what most people in the country earned. That's no longer the case. Now construction jobs are right at about that 100 point. So people working in construction are doing about as well as the average person in the country, but they're not doing as well as they used to. Right? So their wage relative to what folks used to earn has fallen. Who has gained? The blue line. So there's the folks that have gained. So that blue line there is health services. The folks working in medicine, be it doctors, nurses, this is a combination of doctors, nurses, aides, and so on. That's where incomes have really gone up. So doctors and nurses, people in healthcare are doing much better relative to the rest of the country today than they were 50, 60 years ago. And then the bottom line is retail trade. So when people talk about good service jobs and bad service jobs, retail trade is definitely one of those things that you put in the bad service jobs category because the average earnings in retail trade are much, much worse than the average earnings in the rest of the country. However, there are also these good jobs. So healthcare would be a good job. I don't have finance up here yet. That's one of the things that I will work on. It was hard to do because of that splicing, but I think I figured out a way this morning to do it. And you'll see some health. I think finance will be similar, but not as extreme as health services. So the takeaway is that there are good service jobs and bad service jobs. You don't want to think about the rise of the service sector as being overall a good thing or overall a bad thing. It's a mix of the two. Okay, so then the question is, what's the effect of the rise of services? Wait a minute, where's those other slides? Hold on. I had two other slides. Where'd they go? Well, that's weird. There's two slides that show that were in the slide when I printed them out, and that I somehow accidentally deleted, which is the imports ones. I wonder if I did that. That's a very strange thing. Yeah, no, I want to show them to you. So hold on a second. Let me play with this and show. Keep my ink file. I got Donna Summer bouncing in my head. Don't do that to me. Okay, there we go. So one of the other questions about, goodbye. I love That's so funny. It's like he's going to duck down next. Okay, so what do we know? What else do we know? At the same time that we've been experiencing this rise of services, it's also an economy for the United States that has had more and more trade. So here's the overall picture, which you've seen, I think, before, that shows both imports and exports. We get, particularly starting 1982, when we go to flexible exchange rates everywhere, we get this rise of exports and rise of imports as a share of GDP. In the right-hand picture, this is showing what they call import penetration. So import penetration is to take the value of imports. It's the value of imports divided by consumption plus investment plus government spending. So of the total amount of, for instance, durable goods that are purchased by households, businesses, and governments in the United States, what share of those purchases are imports? And there you can see that what we particularly import, so the green line is services. In the slides that I accidentally deleted somehow, I had fixed this up so you can see that. You can see particularly what we're talking about here is a rise in durable goods imports, so cars, right? So I drive Toyotas. So the big increase in the importation of cars. Also an increase in the importation of non-durable goods. Now some of that non-durable goods is oil, but it's also probably every piece of clothing in this room is probably also included in that non-durable goods. The bottom line, the green line that's not labeled, sorry about that, is services. We do import some services, but not very many. We export an awful lot of services, so every international student, that represents an export in the United States. It's an export of educational services. We can also, that's the same picture as we just had, so this is the one on the right on this slide is exactly the same as the one on the left on this slide. Over here, looks at net import. So here, it's possible that some of the it's not only possible, it's actually true, some of the imports of durable goods we may turn right around and re-export. And so what the picture on the right looks at is not just imports, but imports minus exports divided by C plus I plus G. So it essentially tries to, in the aggregate, subtract out those re-exports of things. But you still see essentially the same pattern. So you still get that the durable goods on net, we're still importing an awful lot of the durable goods. We're importing on net a lot of the non-durable goods. The services on net, we're exporters of services. The patterns change a little bit, but generally the overall story is still increase over time, starting around 1980. All right, now let me go back to the other. Maybe I won't turn my back this time. I'll do it. Nick, anybody else does that? You just trip him with your foot. Stick it back like that.